So in one of his most famous similes, Lord Buddha said, just as waters of every sea and ocean share the same salty taste, so do all of the teachings of the Tathagata share the same taste, that of vimukti or liberation. So to prioritize teachings, or to consider that some are more important than others, that some should come before others, would often lead us to overlook the liberative potential of the most basic or fundamental of our commitments as Buddhists. And this morning we participated in an offering of dana, and so it's, I think, useful to remind ourselves that dana is a practice characterized by, or one which is essentially a movement towards liberation, and the kind of liberation that we can experience through dana is that weakening of attachment to wealth and possessions as being me, my possessions, my hard-won wealth. And the Buddha, another sutta, said that the attitude of possessiveness or stinginess is one of the most important hindrances to inner peace, wisdom and enlightenment. So it's not a small matter. And we begin, as with most practices, with the easy and work towards the difficult. And so sharing as a daily practice until it becomes second nature, giving, so that the mind, just as in the untrained mind, all kinds of unskillful thoughts pop up into the mind. So one first sense of shock, where did that come from? And we were talking about this last night. Simply as you train the mind, as thoughts of giving and sharing arise spontaneously in the mind of one who practices dana. It's a very beautiful thing to see in yourself and to see in others. When there's a lovely anecdote from the life of Mahatma Gandhi. Many of you perhaps will, or some of you will have been to India and experienced the Indian trains and how incredibly crowded they are. We could, at a space like this, so it's an Indian train, you get a couple of thousand people. So Mahatma Gandhi was trying to get onto a train one day. So many people, such a crush of people, that just as he was climbing into the carriage, one of his shoes fell onto the track just as the train was leaving, And immediately, without thinking, he took off his other shoe and threw it down onto the track. Can you see the logic? If he had, just one shoe, he can't use it. And if a poor person was to find the other shoe on the track, it would be of no use to him either. But he, whereas the poor person on the track is never going to be able to get his other shoe on his foot, he can throw it down there. So that happened in a second, without conscious thought, through cultivating the power of and the inner strength of Dhamma. So giving and sharing is such a beautiful thing. And coming to the West, I've reflected on this idea of modern Western ideas and whether or not, to what extent they fit with the Buddha's teachings. And one of the topics I reflect on is self-esteem, self-respect. And is that actually a necessary part of spiritual life? If so, how does the Buddha talk about it, and how is it developed? And my conclusion is that the two things which strengthen self-esteem most effectively are dana and sila. In Ubon, in the forest monasteries of northeast Thailand, we go an alms round every day, and this is a tradition that Ajahn Sudanto is to maintain here in White Salmon. These days, the standard of living in the local villages is much higher than it was when I was first there over 30 years ago. In those days, on alms round, you wouldn't expect to get much more than a big bowl full of sticky rice. And a big bowl full of sticky rice is very heavy, believe me. And every now and again you get a banana or some dried fish, but not really enough to live on for any length of time. Usually village people would come to the monastery and cook some supplementary dishes in the monastery kitchen. But one of the things that was wonderful about the alms round in those days was that firstly everyone's waiting for you in the morning. So in northeast Thailand, people get up very early. First thing that the lady of the house would do would be to cook some sticky rice, and then go outside her front door, and have a chat with the next door neighbour and wait for the monks to arrive. And often they would bring children out to teach children how to put food in the bowl. So some children starting at 2 and 3 years old. And it's just a wonderful way to start the day with an act of generosity and kindness. But a significant point, I think, is that the majority of people, as I say, would have a plate with some sticky rice on it, a lump of sticky rice. And they would take just about that much and put in each bowl, say 6 or 7 monks. And even the poorest person in the village, and there were some very poor people, could afford a lump of sticky rice divided into 6 portions. And so it meant that every single person in that village could have this sense of participation in the life of the monks and in their practice, and they felt that they were tangibly contributing to the sasana, to the religion. And that was a source of great self-respect for them. They, through their small act of generosity and kindness, helped the monks to be able to live and to be free of illness and to have the strength to meditate and to fulfill their responsibilities. So I think you can see that when we give and we share, we are creating an impact on the world in which we live. We are reducing, even by a very slight amount, the total sum of human suffering or animal suffering. We are increasing, even by a very tiny amount, the sum total of human happiness of sentient beings. So every act of generosity is an act of affirmation and is a reminder that, our life means something. Because what's more important in the world than the reduction of suffering and the increase of happiness? And dana is that wonderful expression of that. And I'm sure you've seen that that power and beauty of dana is not in any way related to how much is given or what is given. I have a wonderful example that sticks in my mind, and I was walking through northeast India, and the last leg of this journey I wanted to follow in the Buddha's footsteps, walking from Bodh Gaya, where he was enlightened, to Sarnath, where he gave his first teaching. And the main road, the direct route from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath is one of the most unpleasant stretches of road in all of India. It's bad enough in a vehicle, let alone walking. It's a very heavily trafficked highway and very dusty and unpleasant. So I looked at a map and I thought that there seemed to be a good possibility, 80% possibility, that I could follow another roundabout path which would increase the journey from some 200 and something kilometres to about 320, 350 kilometres. Unfortunately, I had a time limit. I only had 8 days, so I had to... I was walking on a path that I wasn't very sure about in part of the country that I didn't know, and I had to walk 40 kilometres every day. And of course, you don't know whether you're going to get fed every day or not, so a couple of days without a meal would have been disastrous. As it was, I got fed every day. Reaching the end of this trek, this walk, I decided to try walking along the railway line. And it was okay, and until I reached a fork in the railway line. Now, my common sense, my sense of direction, my intuition, everything told me that I needed to go left. And I thought, even me, the monk with the most notoriously bad sense of direction in the whole Western Sangha, can't go wrong here. So I took this left turn, conscious, I had this 40 kilometres I had. And then before I walked about, I'm talking, you can translate miles into kilometres, 5 or 6 kilometres, 7 kilometres, whatever. One of these, what do you call it? These things like you see in silent movies where they've got people on the track. And there was this very kind of arrogant-looking civil servant with these coolies doing all the physical labour. And I thought, well, it doesn't, it wouldn't do any harm just to ask him. I said, Sarnath? No, not this way. So I thought, Indian people, it's just so hopeless. Even when you ask directions, and they always give you confused. So I was so convinced I was right, you see. And it was only after the third person that I asked that I realised I'd actually walked like 12 kilometres in the wrong direction. So I had to walk 12 kilometres back, and I still had another 20 kilometres to walk to fulfil my quota, so I'd get back to Sarnath in order to catch a plane back to Thailand. So I had to walk after dark, and I didn't have any batteries in my torch, so it was rather hairy, and I was stumbling along, when suddenly these lanterns appeared coming in the opposite direction. There was two railway officials out checking the track, and they saw me and they told me off, and I couldn't understand, thankfully. But they made me their prisoner, really. They told me I had to follow them back. It was only about an hour later that we came to this chasm, this gorge, and there was a bridge over it, and it was extremely narrow. And they were able to make clear to me that many people had died on this bridge because it's quite a long bridge, and if you're in the middle and the train comes, there's nowhere to go, and it's straight down. So they had to consult their watch before we crossed over. Okay, so we walked, and I actually probably walked further than I would have done if I'd been by myself. So by the time we got to the station, we were all buddies and friends, and we were getting on very well. And they were kind of a little bit inspired, I think, at this time. So they said, you can come and spend the rest of the night with us. So we walked to the end of the station, and there was this concrete box, and this was where we were going to spend the night. When it was just concrete floor, concrete walls, nothing. And this was it. And then one of them, he disappeared, and then he came back. And this is what I'm telling you the story. This was his dana. He bought me a breeze block for a pillow. Yeah. He offered a breeze block. Yes. This is for you to sleep on, for your head. He said. And that was the most touching offer of, dana, and there's this thought in his mind. He didn't have any money, he didn't have anything. But he thought, we're sleeping on a concrete floor, he hasn't got a pillow, what could we possibly think to sort of make him a little bit more comfortable? Breeze blocks. So I think dana is a beautiful thing, and if you look back in the past and think of two occasions, one in which you've made an offering, you've given something with some kind of ulterior motive, whether it's a more sort of crass material benefit in mind, or else some more intangible reward such as respect, affection, renown, or whatever. Notice that even if that act did fulfill some useful purpose and help somebody, after a certain period of time, no very long time at all, looking back on that act, you feel kind of indifferent about it, maybe even a little bit embarrassed. But on any occasion when you give something, and you've given something and you had absolutely no desire for any kind of reward, or even for anyone to know what you did, and you recollect that a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years, 20 years later, and it just feels so good. And this is why the Buddha referred to it like noble treasures of the heart. So, having given away something and shared it without any, you gain this noble treasure of the heart. And in meditation practice, I think often we can be rather narrow in our approach to meditation, and in seeking to create, to sustain a sense of wakefulness, alert, relaxation, relaxed alertness. Sometimes the mind is just very stubborn and very intractable, obsessed with something, worried about something. You feel bad about yourself, and you just don't want to meditate. So, what do you do about that? And sometimes just putting aside for one moment your usual meditation object and taking up one of the discursive meditations, particularly the recollection of the good, kind things that you've done in your life. You can do it in a systematic way. The first time you've done it, you do it, make a list even, and spend a couple of minutes on each one of the things, the good, kind, wholesome things that I have done in my life that I'm most proud of, 1 to 10. And then usually you'll find 1 or 2 which really bring up some really strong positive emotion. And then you can focus on 1 or 2, or you can go through them one by one. So you're saying, okay, mind, you really want to think, okay, I'm not going to stop you, I'm going to put you on a long leash, you can think, but you've got to think about the things I want you to think about. You can think about this act of kindness and goodness, and you can remember it, and all the things that happened, and all that, and then this one, and then this one. And if, you see, the difference between wholesome thoughts and unwholesome thoughts is, unwholesome thoughts just go on and on and on and on and on until you take a pill or you're just exhausted. Whereas wholesome thoughts, they reach a certain point and they just kind of merge or melt into peace. There's a certain point where all the thinking, the agitation, that energy which wants to express itself mentally is gradually reduced in a very natural, organic kind of way. And the sense of rapture and happiness that can come into the mind through recollection of goodness that we've done can be a more effective suppressant of the hindrances and lead more swiftly and effectively into states of inner peace and stillness than our usual meditation object. So it's a matter of saying, what does the mind really need right now? Rather than having, this is my practice, I'm going to do it like this. You say, well, yeah, but quite frankly, my mind just doesn't want this right now. And this is ability to look and to be a little bit more flexible and creative in practice. And before I came here, I mentioned I was in Bhutan, and I was basically visiting schools and attending meetings. But last day we climbed up to the Tiger's Nest, which is a mountain on the side of a cliff face, and the monastery itself is about 2,800 meters. It's very high, and the air is very thin. It's a very steep climb. And the group of teachers that I'd taken with me from Thailand were not in tip-top physical condition, and it was a real struggle for them. So one couple of teachers were really struggling, so I just taught to use a mantra, and the mantra was, and this is in Thai, it's Ni Le Ku Bun, Ni Le Ku Bun, Ni Le Ku Bun. Yes, and it's this which is merit. It's this which is merit. It's this which is merit. So with walking, if you take like a 2-syllable word or 4-syllable or a phrase, and just develop that in order to create a positive and uplifting mental state, you can deal very effectively with discomfort. For instance, one of the common complaints, people say, I know I should meditate, I know it's good for me, but sometimes I'm just too upset, just too agitated, just too this, too that. And so I say, well, this is like someone who says, I'm just too ill to go to see the doctor. Let me get better and then I'll go and see the doctor. And it's precisely the time when you should sit there. You see, if you conceive meditation as getting away from all this and finding this other kind of blissful state where you don't, at least temporarily, don't have to deal with being who you are, who you think you are, and all your problems, then you become like a good weather meditator very easily. Because if you don't get what you think you really want to get from meditation, well, why bother? So this takes me on to a story. I love telling stories, and like a year or two ago, somebody in Thailand, one of my students, gathered all the stories I've been telling for 30 years in a book. And so I sort of lost all my energy to tell stories. I remember to tell stories and say, yeah, I read that one in your book. And I got a distinct impression they thought it was better in the book than it was live. So after a while I just find I'm telling you fewer and fewer stories. You know? But as this book hasn't been translated into English, and as I do have the story that I really like and is appropriate, yeah, I will tell it. And this is a story about a master of archery. And I think you can imagine a master of archery. He's not so tall, he's kind of wiry and strong, maybe sort of a greying beard here, and sort of stern but kind of warm eyes, and very powerful, grounded kind of figure. You can imagine a master of archery. Anyway, he has this young student who's really good. I mean, he's really gifted. And the young students, other young students, start to look on this young man as a bit of a hero. And he's so good. It's like firing, shooting an arrow from here, way over there. And then he fires one arrow up in a sort of high arc. And then quickly a second one in a lower arc. And then just as the first arrow is about to slice through a slice of sushi hanging from a tree of a pine tree 100 meters away, the second arrow comes right in. The sushi falls down to the mouth of an earthenware dog sitting on the forest floor. It's just so amazing. And people say, it's just like CGI. How could we do that? And so he starts to get a bit full of himself, and after a while he thinks he's better than the teacher. So the teacher calls him into his room and he says, I hear that you think that you're better than me now. And he says, yeah. And he says, well look, it's quite possible. I mean, I'm not going to be in the prime position forever, but I think to legitimize this, rather than having an unseemly kind of power struggle in here, we should have some kind of official competition. Yeah, whatever. Okay. So, right. So one thing, I reserve the right to choose where this. Yeah, sure, no problem. So they all meet in the sort of the big archery field, and then the master takes him walking up this winding hill, higher and higher and higher and higher, and the wind's blowing, and then they come to this chasm, deep chasm, and you look down, and what's that? Well, that's an eagle down there, just wind's blowing, and there's a tree trunk laid across the chasm. And the master just walks to the middle of the tree trunk, sheer drop on either side, the eagle's looking at him, and pulls back his arrow, and she's straight like this. And attached by super glue to a pine tree, 50 meters away, is a brown-coloured M&M. The arrow slices between the two ends. One end falls down into the mouth of a monkey, another into the mouth of a marmot. It's just so cool. And the student, he's afraid of heights. He's totally lost his bearings. My God, what's that down there? Those people, they look like ants. And the master says, those are ants. He's lost his sense of perspective and everything. So he's only got to put one foot on and he fires his arrow, and it's a miserable failure. So he's saying it like this, and the teacher says to him, "Look, you are not a master of archery. You're a technician. A technician can be brilliant and can look as good as the master when all the surrounding conditions support him. When the technician is in familiar and predictable conditions. But if you take the technician out of that, what people call comfort zone, and you put him somewhere where he feels threatened and vulnerable and under pressure, the technician falls apart. So you're a very good technician, but you still to train more to become a master. So, of course, the application is to meditation practice also, and the temptation for us to become technicians. And one of the values of monastic training is, you're constantly having to do things you don't want to do. And the bell goes at 3 o'clock and 3:30 in the morning. In Thailand, at least, it's morning chanting, and 4 o'clock is a meditation period. And it's the time to meditate, and you don't have any choice about it. And so you become very familiar with sitting with unpleasant and uncongenial mind states, and you become used to it. And this is, hopefully the training towards mastery, rather than become a technician. This is one of the difficulties for you as lay meditators, where you don't have that kind of social pressure, and that when you feel really upset and agitated and so on, then obviously it's a huge temptation not to sit, or to sit for a while and say this isn't working and get out. But if we look on spiritual practice as a whole, but in particular, and the application of meditation techniques as an exploration, we're learning this skill of trying to sustain this relaxed alertness, this wakefulness, this Buddha knowing, whatever the conditions. Last night I repeated my contention that Buddhism differs from the great belief systems in many significant ways, one of which is that it is essentially an education system. The Arahant is the Aseka Pugala, the graduate. Everyone else is a student. And we, in schools in which I teach, we say, look, we're all students here. We have 3 kinds of students: pupils, teachers, and parents. And we never forget that you're still a student. You've still got things to learn. And so in our practice, what we should be learning to do is how to develop skillful means to protect the mind from unarisen, unwholesome dhammas, to deal constructively and wisely with unwholesome dhammas that have arisen, finding ways to bring into the mind wholesome dhammas that have not yet arisen, and to develop further and further and further those wholesome dhammas that have already arisen. This is what we're doing in meditation practice. So the Ajahn Chah, when speaking to the monks, he very rarely would say, okay, go and meditate. He would say, go and put forth effort. So, if we think in terms of, our prospects for enlightenment in this lifetime and so on, maybe you might become somewhat discouraged. I can't do that. What could be more sad and more beguiling and more persuasive than that little voice in you? I can't do this. I was speaking to someone who has this little voice in their head on a regular basis just a couple of days ago. And I was saying a practice that I've, one of these little skillful means that I've developed is I've done a lot of work and investigation of anatta to the extent that now I have little key words and phrases which bring up this perception of anatta, selflessness, very swiftly and effectively. And so even this is one of my mantras, even this. So, when that sense of self is really strong, or that little voice is so persuasive, I can't do this, it's too much, I don't need this, or whatever, then you should say, even this is not self. Even this. So, it's the idea that seeing when there's a very strong feeling, well, there must be some self in that. You say, even this. And keep bringing your mind back to that perception that this is an empty phenomenon. It's arising due to causes and conditions. If it's strong and a powerful kind of emotion, it's because you've been feeding it for a long time. And all you can do is to stop feeding it. Ajahn had one of these lovely similes. He said it's as if you put a glass of milk out for a cat, and every day, and so the cat comes every day. And if you stop putting out the glass of milk, it's not that the cat will stop coming immediately. It'll still keep coming for a few days just to check out whether you've changed your mind. But if you're sufficiently determined, or if you're a dog person rather than a cat person, then eventually the cat will realize that you're adamant and go look for his milk somewhere else. And similarly, you do have that sense of resolution and not indulging in emotion, in mental states, either with like or with dislike, because both of them add fuel to the flames. So trying to drive out things from your mind doesn't work. It's very frustrating, and it's based on the wrong view. It's based of, I have this nasty thing in my mind which I don't want. So you're starting off from the wrong view. And as I said, any effective practice has to begin with right view, or samadhi. So developing this interest and willingness to be with and to learn from, developing this idea of yourself as a student of life and a student of all that life has to offer. And with this kind of lion's roar that everything is ultimately workable because everything that arises passes away and is not self. So I think another kind of image for you, I think when we're first starting to practice, often you can feel like this little boat, rudderless boat in this stormy ocean. And then as you practice more and more, the perception changes, and it's like you're the ocean and the mental state is the boat. So there's sort of this awareness of this boat bobbing around, but it's this sense of being oppressed and overwhelmed and I can't take this anymore is replaced by this perception of something arising, passing away, some center of agitation within the larger context of non-agitation. So the practices of meditation that are laid down in the books are the ones that meditators have been using for a very long time and are proven. But that's not to say that they are exhaustive. And if you grasp the underlying principles of practice, then you can be somewhat creative, as long as the smaller practice is congruent with the larger principle. And there's a Pali phrase, I'm not sure the English translation, is practicing Dhamma in accord with Dhamma, is it? Some of my learned friends, they will tell you some other time. I'm afraid I often think in Thai and I have to translate it into English these days. It's Dhamma Patipatha, that's what it's called in Pali. One thing I'd like to share with you is that you have to enjoy meditation. Don't look on it as a chore or something you really should do. Find ways of enjoying it, because if there's any protection against this addiction to memory and thought and imagination, fantasy, it is enjoying the present moment. If your mind is constantly going off here and there, it means that you are considering that kind of activity is going to make you happier than being in the present moment with your meditation object. So you can sort of wag your finger at yourself and say you shouldn't be like that, but this is, I think, basic, isn't it? We none of us want to suffer, and we all want to be happy. We may have some rather strange and deluded ideas about what happiness and suffering might be, but underneath that there is a unity. So if you're speaking with people whose political views you disagree with very strongly, or as lifestyle choices you find totally bizarre or objectionable, behind that, I would say they're motivated by a desire to be free, avoid suffering, and to experience happiness. So there is a meeting place there. But if you can find happiness and enjoyment even when your mind is not yet particularly calm or peaceful, then your practice will become very strong. So how to gain and care for that kind of interest and commitment? This is some of the challenges that we have. In Thailand, I often says people observe that when they think they're meditating for themselves, this is something I'm doing in order to get some particular benefit from it. So Ajahn Siddhanta said his ideas when he first started. I think most people think like that. So what happens when you start to, and your mind's all over the place, and your legs are hurting, and it's just, what's the point? Or you're really sleepy, and you think, I just might as well crash out, and maybe get up a bit earlier in the morning and make up for lost time. That's a favourite one with monks. Instead of getting up it's really too early to go to bed, but I'll get up at 2:30 instead of 3 and sort of make up for it. Maybe very few people do. I'm revealing the secrets of the monastic order here. So I said, well, look, if you think it's for me in order for me to get something, and actually even if I get it, it's not such a big deal, I'd rather have this instead, then your meditation is not going to be very consistent. So I said, let's look at it a different way. You say, going to make merit for my mum and my dad. I'm going to put in half an hour's effort and dedicate that to my mother and my father. That's, it could be your mother and your father or your grandfather or loved ones, but this idea of effort as meritorious activity and then sharing that merit with others. So we don't have to go into the philosophy of this, or does they actually receive it or not? But the point being is just that change of attitude, that now suddenly where's all this energy come from? Where's it, that must have been there in the first place, but simply just a tweak of your attitude can have quite remarkable results. So, it says, I'm so lazy, I don't know this, I just got so lazy. Well, this laziness is a product, it's a condition. So what are the causes and conditions for laziness? One story I often told is I did a long retreat, solitary retreat, and I was very motivated, but there was a period where I got really kind of lazy, just had no enthusiasm, a sense of ennui and dryness and lack of interest arose. So I thought, well, instead of saying I shouldn't be like this and trying to fight with it, because it's not very successful, so what are the causes and conditions for it? What are the causes and conditions for effort? And my answer was faith. So I thought, what kind of practice, devotional practice, can I perform to bring up that faith, which will in turn lead to effort? So I started bowing practice. I bowed to the Buddha 3 times, and I bowed to Ajahn 3 times, and then I started bowing to all the monks I could think of in the Ajahn tradition, all the great teachers, like 3 bows for Lumpur Te, 3 bows for Dhamma Bua, 3 bows for Lumpur Kao, 3 bows for Lumpur Wan, and thinking of these great monks and bowing to them. So after a while I ran out of monks in the Ajahn tradition, and I thought historical tradition, and the great monks of 3 bows for Sariputta, 3 bows for Moggallana, 3 bows for Venerable 3 bows for this monk and that monk, and I spent a long time recollecting great and inspiring figures in the Buddhist world of the present and the past, and just all this great rapture and joy arose in me. And that ennui and that despair or just sense of this is not working just disappeared as if magically. And it gave me great confidence in my practice that there isn't such a thing as a dead end, there's a perception of a dead end. And that perception is a conditioned phenomena and one which can be worked with. That everything is workable, was my conclusion. So I've shared a few thoughts about practice in its context, and beginning with the value. One thing that I mentioned in brief, just to add for the sense of completion, self-respect, self-esteem as a function of dana and sila. I expanded on dana. Sila, when in our tradition, it's a voluntary acceptance of boundaries. It has to be voluntary. Through wisdom and understanding of the value of keeping each particular precept and the suffering, the problems that arise from not keeping it, both internally and in one's social relationships. And then being able to consistently conduct oneself within those boundaries, even or especially at times when there is pressure or temptation not to do so, over the course of time, is a major foundation for self-respect. So there's the dana and the sila, the self-respect, when you are friends with yourself, where you really like being with yourself, you like yourself, then you're ready to apply these techniques more successfully. If you have this perception that you've harbored and made much of, that you're basically an unworthy person or a bad person or whatever, then when you reach that point where meditation is starting to develop, you think this, I don't deserve this, or it's too wonderful for me, little old me, or something like this, or you shy away from it even. So the mind can be very conflicted and really lack that singleness of purpose unless you work out that wise attitude to yourself and wise attitude to practice. So samadhi is right view, is the essential prerequisite for the other factors of the Eightfold Path. So given a few ideas about particular techniques and attitudes and practices, and would like to offer this to you on this auspicious occasion of the Papa and the opening of the new Pacific Heritage. Thank you.
Sadhu, 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 Anumodha.
So I have time and interest in further discussion and answering any questions that anyone might have. It is 7 minutes to 5, so if any of you have other appointments and things you have to do, then please feel free to do so. But if anybody still would like to carry on and ask any questions, then I would be most happy to answer them to the best of my ability.
Ajahn, could you also just mention that you'll be here on Tuesday?
Oh, I shall.
From 7 till 9.
Okay. I shall also be here on Tuesday evening from 7 until 9.
Will you be on alms rounds with the Dhamma and Dhamma?
If they invite me. In Thailand, what we say, maybe making, which means if you don't be devout, you don't eat. Unless you're ill, in which case. Yeah.
I have a brief question. I told you about the group I'm working with, the brain injured population down at Good Samaritan Hospital. There's a group, and they have a self-led group. And I led an introduction to meditation for them this morning. And I feel I'm appreciating your talk very much. You seem to really. I feel a great enthusiasm from your speaking. I want to impart that enthusiasm, that possibility of meditation, rather that I know that each of us discovers that in the practice of meditation. I found that in my practice, and I don't speak it so skillfully. But I want to impart, if you have any tips or suggestions for speaking that, if you know what I'm saying.
No, you're probably aware our tradition is one in which we're told very firmly never to prepare anything beforehand. And monks that have been talking for years, like me, after a certain period of time, gain a certain proficiency. But most of us start off stumbling and not particularly skilled and articulate, and that's all right. And often the sincerity and the enthusiasm that someone may take away from a talk which is less than perfectly articulated may in the long term be more valuable to them than beautiful phrases, many of which they were already have read in books. So I think you're probably doing fine. And in monks we have this advantage because particularly in Thailand, you give talks to a captive audience. And I started public speaking when I couldn't in Thai, years before I spoke in English, really, and when my Thai wasn't very good either. And it was on the observance day, and there was these 4 old ladies who used to come and sit in front of me. And I had to sit there and try and say something. And they were just like this. And whatever I said was exactly the same. Zero feedback. -0 feedback. And I gave talks like this every observance day for about 4 or 5 months, until any expectation of feedback was suddenly burnt out of my brain. So, and in our own monastery, Wat Nanata, the villagers, adopt all the monks, the young monks. They look on them as their children or family, and it's a very warm. And so when the monks first start to speak in public, then all the villagers are really sort of, come on, you can do it, kind of thing. And they're very, and then I saying, did you understand anything? No, but you really tried hard. It was really cute. Because some of these old villages, if you look at them, from the outside, it was just like poor peasant farmer people. But they have very sophisticated appreciation of Dhamma Discourse. And it's surprising if you can speak with them and they know you and they open up a little bit. And in Thailand generally, in northeast Thailand particularly, it's a culture with where people have an incredible appreciation of the use of language, and we tend to associate that with people who are very educated, literate people, but these are often quite illiterate people, but they love language, and I'm blessed or cursed with a punning mind, and so villagers love it when I play on words and play with their language, and it gives them great joy and enjoyment. And now myself, I've never really prepared anything. I might be able to talk about the 4 Noble Truths today or something like that. But sometimes, after I've spoken for a few minutes, I realise that, it's like the 4 Noble Truths are over there, and I'm going this direction, and this is it's too far away, so I'll just have to go in this direction instead. And Ajahn Chah himself, if you were able to understand Thai, you listen to his talks, and it's like he's sort of, first few minutes, he's sort of going here and going there, and then suddenly he gets a groove and he goes in this way. It's not like anything. But then after a while, you become so, become just something that becomes natural. So, I'm giving talks to 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people without any preparation at all. And it doesn't make it, for me now, 5 people or 500, it doesn't really make any difference at all. So, and that's not, it's just something that comes through doing it a lot. I'll tell you a little story. No, this is not a story. This is something that just happened to me a few days ago. I'm usually live a very secluded life. I meet with lay people twice a month, generally. Other than that, very quiet. Generally. Anyway, I announced at the beginning of April, I believe, that from now until I go to America, any donations are all going to the Pacific Hermitage in Oregon. And so this is how people got to know about it and started making donations. And then around Visakha Puja, I accepted 1 or 2 speaking engagements which I wouldn't normally have accepted. So one of my students owns a big shopping mall in Korat, in a big city, and he also owns this exhibition centre behind it, and every May, Visakha Puja, he has this program of inviting well-known monks to come and give talks and these exhibition centre. In the centre of it, there's this large sort of decor called mondok with Buddha relics that he borrowed. And along one side of the hall, there are all these monks giving blessings and talking with people. And there's a big exhibition space devoted to Lung Dhamma Habua, who just passed away, and then an area giving public talk. So I gave this talk. There's a lot of people there, and afterwards, and these days in Thailand, you get down giving a talk, and there's video cameras and phone cameras, and people want to autograph books, and it's kind of sort of weird kind of thing. And so I was walking out of this and turned a corner, and there was a kind of a darker area, shade, and there was a woman squatting down with her hands in Anjali, and a daughter. The daughter was about 6 or 7 years old. And I spoke some words with the mother, and then I glanced at the daughter who was looking up at me, and it seemed like she'd had some knot. She had this discoloration. I could just see under her eye. So I said, so basically I said, "Oh, what's wrong?" And she looked up at me and she said, "It's a birthmark." And and I thought at that moment, she's thinking, even the Ajahn, everybody looks up to the first thing, the only thing that he notices about me is my birthmark. And what I'm telling you is that in the space of probably like clock time, not 1 second, I gave a complete Dhamma talk to that girl. It just went right through my mind. Like people say just before they think someone's going to die, but all these things happen. They see their whole life in flashback. I had a whole 30-minute Dhamma discourse comforting this young girl and telling her, it's not who you are, it's just sort of about the body, and anybody who thinks it's a big deal, you don't want to know them anyway, and this inner beauty is. And I gave a really lovely talk. I mean, you would have tears in your eyes if you heard that talk. And it took 1 second, one mental moment, and then next minute someone would have said, Ajahn, and so I gave this girl, I hope it was a very warm smile and looked on, and I hope she understood. Well, I hope she heard the talk. But when giving a talk in that, this is one kind of situation with a talk. If you're giving a talk up on a stage with lights and a microphone, and there's a few hundred people way down there, it's more like a meditation. And so we're feeling very peaceful and centered when I was walking. So, there's just that can happen. And you just see that, I think, our ideas of time are just so, obviously inaccurate. The idea of time as an arrow going from one point to another point. This doesn't, subjectively, it doesn't seem like that at all. Anybody else have anything you'd like to?
We were talking about effort today and last night, talking about different types of effort, and sort of going through my head, thinking, I need a routine. Monday, quadrant 1, according to this, quadrant 2, or whatever. Because I think I spend most of my
planning to put effort into putting down things, whether I put it in there or not. That's what I'm contemplating. I don't know if you've got any advice or thoughts on I've got these 4 things already in front of me.
I think to begin with, to use those 4 right efforts in the 4 areas of life that I was talking about last time, more in terms of assessment, just quiet moments, just recalling what's happened during the day, and in order to see, areas which are still lacking, or whether yes, that I should, and so gaining some ideas and for the following day. So it's a Pachawekana kind of recall and assessment kind of practice to begin with, until you become more familiar with it as just a way of looking at things. And then, it's a matter, again, of creating these useful memories and sanya, perceptions, which become strengthened over time. So, for instance, you're in a situation where someone's very angry, let's say some kind of confrontation in a car park or something, and suddenly you're confronted with this red-faced person. So, then in terms of right efforts, well, one is to prevent unwholesome dhammas from arising. What are the kind of unwholesome dhammas that might arise in your mind when some red-faced person accuses you of doing something that wasn't your fault at all? So you're aware, so how do you protect your mind? Or if you're starting to feel some kind of agitation, so how do you deal with that? What are the positive qualities which are really needed to deal with that situation? How can we bring them up right there and then and care for them and sustain them throughout the length of that exchange? So in these kind of everyday experiences, then it's just developing this kind of skill of being. One thing I often say in Thailand is talking about Buddhism as this supreme education system, the most organic, holistic, complete, comprehensive education system the world's ever seen. So I tell people say, yeah, that sounds good. So I ask people, where is the classroom? If it's an education system, where is the classroom? And so the classroom is the present moment. And that's where everything is learned and studied. And one of the reasons why I speak in those terms is to get away from the idea that being in the present moment is the goal. It's not, it's the means. It's the step. You're entering the place where now you can learn. Unless if you're in the present moment, it's all hearsay, it's all beside the point. It's not a direct learning experience. That's the value of developing the skill and ability to be in the present moment, because then you can protect the mind from the unwholesome, you can reduce or eliminate the unwholesome, you can do all these things once you're in the present moment. So many of these basic skills are really just to enable you to spend more and more time in the classroom, as it were, to extend the knowledge.
Could you repeat the Cliff Notes version of the 4 efforts?
The Cliff Notes for
very just
a summary. Yes. Is the effort to protect the mind against unwholesome dhammas which have not yet arisen. The second effort is the effort to eliminate those unwholesome dhammas, negative states that have already arisen. The third effort is to bring into the mind, to bring up in the mind, wholesome dhammas that have not yet arisen. And the fourth effort is to care for, to nurture, and to bring to maturation those wholesome dhammas that have already arisen in the mind. Yes.
on the discourse stream, is there often awareness of the in-breath and out-breath? When you're in the discourse?
No, I don't pay attention to the breath is just one of the tools in your toolbox. It's a very effective, maybe the one that we use the most, but there are obviously occasions in which it's not appropriate. If you're in a meeting, for instance, you don't want to be watching your breath. You want to be listening to what somebody's saying. You need to be expressing. You need to have a sense from when's the right time to listen, when's the right time to speak, when's the right time to agree, when's the right time to disagree, when's the right time to lead, when's the right time to follow, and that kind of readiness and flexibility is what you're looking for in those kind of social situations, and it's very difficult to do that in conjunction with the breath. So I would just put the breath aside for that kind of situation. Any more questions? Okay, if that's... want to say something?
I just want to express my appreciation again for Ajahn Jayasaro coming to visit us, and all the efforts he's made to help support the establishment of our community here. And also it's really heartening to see a room full of people here in White Salmon listening to Dhamma today. So really appreciate everybody coming out to listen to this teaching and meditate together. We'll be hosting Ajahn Jayasaro for another couple days, and he will be joining us on alms round every day, inshallah, or if he's willing. So since we just moved to White Salmon, we have kind of random routes, except for our Monday and Wednesday, Friday routes. But most days we're trying to be on Jewett here in the central area from about 8:30 till 9. So if we're not passing your house, you can just drive around and chase us. Like some people do. We don't mind it at all. You can stalk us.
I know a lady in Bangkok who goes jogging in the morning with a tray of food on it. And when she passes a monk, she stops and puts the food
or we'll be here somewhere between 8:30 and 9 o'clock if you don't like jogging. You can just find a bench on Jewett here and meditate and wait for us to come by. Also, people are welcome to come to offer food at the Hermitage. So it's just all the way at the end of Barnett Road. Take Spring Street down and follow the road up. And take the driveway on the left before you get to the end. So we'll have our meals at 11 o'clock. People are welcome to join us for those. There's some people that have pre-scheduled to offer the meals, but everybody's welcome to come and join in, whether you bring food or not. And it's also an opportunity to speak more with Ajahn Jayasaro while he's here. Aside from those times, I can't guarantee we'll be there. You're welcome to come see if you can find us, but I'd like to also sort of show Ajahn Jayasaro the region here. So we'll be going out for some drives and some walks and hikes to enjoy the good weather and the scenery. And lastly, on Tuesday night, when we have our regular sitting from 7 till 8:30, Ajahn will be joining us for that. And that'll be his last night here. Early the next morning, he'll be flying off to Vancouver, BC. and then back to Thailand. So please come on Tuesday if you're available, and let other people know in the community that we have very special guests for the next couple of days. And if there's people that haven't had a chance to visit the Hermitage, we're going to be going back there very soon, and you're welcome to just come stop by, and I'll take people for a brief little tour, and we're going to sit and have tea for a little bit. So if you'd like to come take a look, please do. And if not, come another day. And maybe end by paying respects to the Buddha shrine, and then everybody had a chance to bow 3 times and pay respects to Ajahn. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swagato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namassami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami